4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, and welcome to Get Recc'd. I am your host, Stephen Falgout.
And I am your other host, Dawn Falgout. Get Recc'd is our podcast where Stephen and I, two siblings, get together and recommend two pieces of media to each other, be it a film, an album, a game, or whatever. And then in the next episode, we get together and discuss each other's recommendations.
Yes, and of course, today we have an action-packed episode where we have two recommendations.
Yeah, it's a double feature today.
Yeah, unlike the other episodes, we're coming at you with one recommendation from me and one recommendation from you.
And not only that, but both of them are revolve around the artist Phoebe Bridgers.
That is true, and also both of them are pieces of media.
That is also true. So when you think about it, it's Phoebe Bridgers media. Of course, not to spoil anything, but we will be talking about one of Phoebe Bridgers' albums and then a film that was based on her music.
Yes, of course. Of course. And it's kind of crazy, too, and, I'm sure we'll talk about it when we get there, but actually she wasn't even alive to create the music that generated the film. So there's, some really interesting time travel things going on. It's crazy how the director had enough budget to actually create a time machine.
Yeah.
Bring her back in time, have her create the music, and then come back to 2007 to create the film.
That's true. And also Phoebe Bridgers was also not born yet in 2007.
Right. It's really, really just wild stuff.
Yeah, so we'll be getting into that today, and if it sounds exciting, believe me, it is. And I think we honestly should just jump right into what you recommended to me, Stephen.
Yes, I recommended to you the album by Phoebe of the clan Bridgers. Of course, her family were known Bridgers. And this album is Punisher, which has no relation to the Marvel character or film. Or maybe it does, actually. I don't know. I haven't asked her explicitly.
Well, maybe we should discuss that and see if we interpret it in that way.
I didn't. But
I didn't
I'll
either.
Let you kind of talk about it. This, of course, just a little more context, was an album that came out in 2020. One of the greatest years of our life, of course, as we all know. Won or is nominated for many awards. A very recent piece of media, which we talk about every now and then. Sometimes we get a little old with it. Sometimes we get a little new with it. We like to stay up to date.
Yeah, and sometimes we combine that with Across the Universe, where Phoebe Bridgers was brought back into the past and then brought into the present, such that the piece of media combines the new and the old.
Right, just like Back to the Future, which we've talked about, so it's all connected.
That's true. Yeah, well, this is fascinating, but I think we should probably talk about the album itself. And I will say that I'll pull Steven's line. Well, not that I hadn't heard of Phoebe Bridgers, because I very much had heard of this album, but I hadn't listened to it, so I'm half pulling Steven's line. And anyway, I've listened to it now. I thought it was pretty cool. So one thing that's funny is that I remember, I guess this isn't completely related to the album itself, but somewhat recently, I don't know if it was a couple months ago, but there was the clip from I think one of the late night shows where Phoebe Bridgers smashed a guitar or whatever, and for some reason there were a bunch of boomers who were mad that she smashed a guitar, which is really funny because speaking of the old and actually the era that Phoebe Bridgers time traveled back to, we keep getting ahead of ourselves, but I just think you should really know about that. There were other people who were smashing guitars, and she might have actually learned it from there. But I wouldn't have thought that having known that this album wouldn't be some kind of punk album or something. It's not even a rock album. A lot of it's kind of spaced out, dreamy indie folk. A lot of it's very yeah, it's the songs themselves, there's only 2 or 3 tracks that even get to a guitar smashing level at all. So I was very, very surprised by that. But it's a very soft album. I think that she spaces it out nicely because you do have moments where it gets a little bit louder, and there are some songs that more prominently feature drums and sound more like indie rock tracks. But a lot of it's like kind of calls back to some singer songwriter traditions, even just very simple, pretty lightly melodic songs focused on the lyrics. And so, with an album like that, I think the one thing that lets me down, or one of the things that lets me down about Punisher, is that the way that it's produced, a lot of these softer tracks, you don't really, the guitar isn't really treated like a acoustic folk guitar or something. Like, you can't, it's not twangy at all. It has no like immediacy to it. It's very like spacey and in the background. It's almost like Phoebe is playing the songs in like the most reverbial chamber like ever, but for some reason her voice is like really clear. So because of that, it sounds a little bit foggy, I guess, sometimes. And like, I kind of wished with some of these tracks that I could hear a little bit more of the guitar work and stuff, like right up front, just to make the songs a little bit more crisp. Because for me, I found some of the tracks that are more focused on like just her lyrics to be a little bit hard to pay a ton of attention to. It just kind of felt like the song almost didn't want me to. Like, it's supposed to be kind of like this dreamy, pretty thing that like you can kind of fall asleep to. And like, that contrasted against like the song Kyoto, which is basically just like an indie rock track. I much preferred that sound from her here, because the immediacy of the production and the instrumentation of the song allowed her lyrics to shine through a little bit more for me. Like, and then it kind of depends, because I guess a lot of it also is that I feel like her lyrics are very personal to her, and they're not bad. Like, they're good lyrics, but I didn't necessarily find them super compelling. Like, and so I guess for probably about half of this album, I found it a little bit distant. Like, the songs themselves are very plain, which is perfectly fine, but they're given this presentation that makes them, kind of dreamlike, to the point where it's hard for me to really get invested in it, or the stories that she's telling, or the narrative that she sort of has going about like this kind of post-apocalyptic thing, sort of. None of that really super came together for me all throughout this album.
I guess I can see that, but I think I don't know if I'd say the opposite opinion, but I guess I was taken more by kind of the I don't know if I would say disconnect, but there's like a disparity between this very psychedelic, kind of dreamy indie rock thing going on, and these incredibly melancholy, somber lyrics that are being expressed in all of the tracks here that I really enjoyed, and it actually connected with me quite a lot. And there's some tracks in particular that I think have this way of just kind of like gripping me in how like honestly often sardonic a lot of this whole thing is, how just completely drab, because I don't know if I've experienced something like that before. I mean, I feel like I have heard music before that has this same character but not the same quality. And like, I think about songs like I See You or Halloween, um, or Moon Song. Like, those three in particular have this great lyrical quality compared to this kind of like indie dreamy rock thing which I'll also mention is like not dissimilar from her album before this, but different enough that it shapes itself into this own thing that I feel like is very alive and just really connected with me. I wanted to say one thing quickly, actually. The reason why I've kind of found this album, I'd heard of Phoebe Bridgers before a little bit. She actually had one song from her breakout album that got some popularity, had a lot of Spotify streaming plays and that sort of things, cropped up on a lot of playlists there. I don't really think it got any airplay, but kind of became famous in that circle. But the reason why I found this follow-up album actually was that, and it's not on this album, it's kind of become a single on by itself that's sort of connected itself to the album, is she started to cover, it's a really good cover, um, Bo Burnham's track from Inside. And I'm trying to find the one that it is. You would know it. It's the one where he plays the guitar, like the acoustic guitar.
Oh, the Funny Feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I came onto this from that, and it's, I really found the expression of that song kind of lent itself to this entire album. I could definitely see why she covered it, first of all. Like, a lot of the lyrical quality here and a lot of what she's expressing has a very similar feel or connotation to the, what Bo is expressing in that song, although that one is much more for kind of a sarcastic quality or, well, I don't know. With him, you never know what's going on, honestly. But I really like how she took that song and transformed it to her own. And then when I came to this album, I really appreciated all of the qualities there that kind of made that so great.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I mean, like, she does have this kind of disaffectation, I guess. The kind of, I'm gonna sound like such a culture writer when I say this, but that kind of like Gen Z disaffectation, like it's...
We know all about that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, but like, it's no, and I definitely see the appeal of it, and like I will say, like, if it sounds like I don't like the album, I do like the album. I think that there are moments that, like, I think I would like to hear from her in a new album that I think would captivate me more. Like, my favorite tracks were Kyoto and I Know the End, which, those are the biggest songs. They have like horn sections in them. I love horn sections. You always win me over with a horn section. So that's probably why I like those songs. But like, I would like to hear her trend more towards doing like indie rock rather than indie folk, because I feel like those acoustic tracks, they feel like they don't completely want to be acoustic tracks. Like, aside from like Graceland 2, which has like these really like, upfront banjos in it. For the most part, a lot of these tracks, like I say, they're very spacey and distant, almost like you're not really supposed to completely hear the clicking of the guitar and that kind of thing. And like, those kind of songs would be fine if there were less of them. I think the thing that I didn't totally like about the album was that it was just like so much of it. Like, when I heard sounds in the album that I would have preferred to hear more of. Like, I feel like if you had, in the next album, you had more songs kind of like Kyoto, more songs like that, and then like a song or two that are more like Halloween or something, that would probably have made the pacing a lot better for me. Because I will say, like, I think this album's only a little over 40 minutes, but it feels a bit longer than that for me, because some of the songs just kind of drag. Like, I'm not totally getting I'm not totally there with the lyrics. Not that they're bad, but I'm just personally not totally there with them. And the sound of the song is losing me a little bit. So that was something that did kind of bother me. I will say, though, like, there's intention to it, at least, where I can tell that, like, she's paced the album intelligently. Like, you'll have maybe like two songs with like that don't really have drums in them, or at least the drums are really in the background, and then there'll be a song that has drums more. And I guess that's meant to kind of, peak and valley your interest across the album, but I don't know. I didn't necessarily find it worked super well for me. I think, like, I will say though, I really like her vocals. Like, her voice is great, but also the way she presents the lyrics, the way she sings them, definitely makes them feel more um, more interesting. I think she just has a really great voice, and she sings the songs very well. It's a very basic way of putting it, but like, there's nothing too like bombastic about it, and I appreciated that. But then at the same time, like, there are moments where she shows she can do that stuff, and that made those moments land even more. Um, I came away from the album basically liking Phoebe Bridgers, not so much loving the album, but it is to the point now where, like, when she releases another album, I'm gonna listen to it when it comes out. So I think that's the biggest positive that I can say for it.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I would be curious what you would think about her debut. I think it's very similar to this. So I would be curious if you have different feelings on that one or not, but maybe that'll be for a different time. We can talk about that.
Yeah. I'm ready to wrap it up if you are.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I would give Punisher a 6. I liked it, but I liked it kind of passively, there weren't a lot of songs that stuck out to me. My favorite track was Kyoto. I will be returning to that song for sure. I really liked it. And like I said, like, I'll follow up with Phoebe Bridgers for sure. I mean, if for no other reason than, like, she's very popular right now. I mean, like, in the indie scene, whatever that even means anymore, she's probably the most popular current artist that I can think of. So, and I thought this album was pretty good. I don't know if I would recommend it. I mean, I guess so, yeah. I don't know why I wouldn't. I have no reason not to. It just wasn't, it didn't super appeal to me, but, like, if you like this kind of, like, spacier, chill, sleepy indie rock, indie folk, you would probably love this album to death, because it is good as that. So, yeah, that's all I have to say.
And I do like those things. And I do like it a lot. Maybe not love it to death. I think I'd give it probably an 8. I didn't talk about it much, but my biggest criticism, and I think you kind of alluded to it, is, because of the nature of the beast in this situation, a lot of it starts to drag a little bit, feels a little samey at certain points, and that probably doesn't boost it up more than that. However, I've been listening to this album just a ton on repeat, honestly, so maybe I feel stronger than an 8, but I would probably just say an 8 for now anyway. And I would recommend it. I think it's a great listen. It's up for some Grammy noms, I think. So as you mentioned, she's definitely in the moment right now. So if you're just looking for something different in the indie scene, something kind of up and coming in the indie scene that might go further than even this album for, in the future, then I definitely think it's worth checking out.
Sweet. And should we get into what I recommended to you, Steven?
Yes, let's.
So I recommended to Steven the film Across the Universe. This is a 2007 jukebox musical film. Jukebox musical meaning that it uses songs that already exist. In this case, songs that Phoebe Bridgers wrote when she was sent back to the 1960s in a time machine. Yeah, I think I will just let Steven tackle it from there.
Yeah, and it's it's kind of wild that we didn't mention this while we were just talking about it. But of course, Phoebe Bridgers was the guitarist and lead vocalist for the band the Rolling Stones. So that's where the music comes from.
That's true, and she was only given that opportunity because she time traveled.
Right, which is crazy because along the way she met Bono, and that's why Bono's in this movie. So just a little fun fact for everyone out there who is curious. Across the Universe, I don't find it very good. It's okay. I don't dislike this film. I think that all the leads here do great covers of the Monkey songs, and I think that's like probably the best thing that you have to show here. I mean, there are honestly a lot of it feels not necessarily like a musical to me, just like a series of music videos, especially as you get into the situations where things get more psychedelic. It's very easy, I feel like, to fall into a trap of turning those psychedelic songs into kind of like, oddball feelings on film. And of course, uh, the Monkees did that so well in their films that they created in the time, in the moment. However, to me now, watching this film, a recreation of those moments just feels more like kind of an out there stretch, but not really anything to the table or interesting. And that's what I generally feel about this movie. Like, I don't feel like it necessarily brings anything to the table or is very interesting. The story, it's okay. I think there's some kind of connection to the time that the artists lived in, which I definitely appreciate that. You're looking at kind of this view of the late 50s going into the 60s and all of that, what all of that meant for the US specifically. However, one of the male lead is from Britain, but you're really looking at it from the lens of the kind of the US politicals and social climate. But other than that, like the main movie is kind of like many different connected love stories that a lot of them, honestly, you don't even see the story. It's like you see the beginning, you see the middle, and you see the end. Like I'm thinking of specifically like the lead band members in this like flat apartment that they all live in. They get together, like one's the lead vocalist and one's the guitarist, and they each kind of have their little backstories that you see bits and pieces of. Then they like have a fight and then they get back together at the end, but you never saw like anything between those three separate moments. And even like the main love story between the two characters just feels so paper thin. A lot of it, I feel like the issue with the film is, and this is a very micro issue, but also kind of a macro issue with the film, is so many different elements exist only to utilize very specific jukebox tracks. Like his name is Jude, her name is Lucy. I mean, you know where that's going to go both ways. And then even one of the characters is Prudence. So it's like so much of the writing is written around fitting in these jukebox tracks, but they don't tell anything interesting and they don't really look that interesting on film. So I'll stop there so you can talk about the Kinks.
For sure. The Kinks are my favorite British invasion band, and the Rolling Stones are in second. And the Monkees, I don't think are British, but they're third. Anyway, as for this film,
What about the Beach Boys? Are they one?
they're also from the U.S., but they would be fourth, behind the Monkees somehow. Anyway,
Well, what you have to remember about an invasion is like once a group comes over and invades, then sometimes they like take over.
right?
So even those
like,
U.S. bands are part of the British invasion because they got subjugated.
yeah. So anyway, as for the film Across the Universe, I hate this movie, and I gotta be honest. I'm curious. What I'm curious about, because I'm sure you all agree with many of my negative points, and I agreed with all the negative points that you brought up. I'm curious, not to ask you now, but to save it for the discussion upcoming, what you thought was good about the film, because you listed out all of the things that I think are just fucking terrible in this movie. But like, I guess the main difference is that you seem to like some of the covers of the Monkey songs a little bit more than I did, maybe. Because for me, most of those cover songs, not only were the covers themselves just terrible, but the sequences to go along with them could be some of the most baffling fucking things. Like, I feel like I've ever seen. I think of "I Want You, She's So Heavy." In that sequence, they did something that, I mean, it's kind of clever on paper. They made it like a song about the U.S. Army recruiting people. So you have like Uncle Sam, "I Want You." That was like a good idea somebody had, but the sequence that they made to go along with it is just appalling. Like, you have these terrible CGI Uncle Sam posters, and then like these like a bunch of like boot camp instructors, like drill instructors with big chins. Um, it's just ugly and bad, and that's what a lot of the sequences are. I also really like Strawberry Fields Forever, where all of a sudden Jude just starts chucking strawberries at the wall, and then it leads into the song. It's not like the song starts and then he's chucking strawberries at the wall. It's just they needed to get to the song somehow, so now he's throwing strawberries at the wall and painting a strawberry. And there's a lot of stuff like that. It's like, it's odd that you're basing this film around the music of the Rolling Stones featuring Phoebe Bridgers, but you didn't really construct the story in a way where any of these things would come naturally from any of the characters or events. I mean, it's odd because, you know, on one hand, we take a movie we reviewed that also features the same music by the Beach Boys, Yellow Submarine. In Yellow Submarine, that film is really, at its core, just an excuse to do weird, crazy shit. But it constructs its story in such a way where all of those elements just flow naturally. Like, you don't really end up questioning the world of Yellow Submarine because it's so strange and psychedelic that all of the music just fits. And I think here they thought that by incorporating the political turmoil of the 1960s, that in the late 1960s, that the music by the Kinks would fit. But it just kind of doesn't. Like, you do have the Summer of Love stuff, right? And you have this like drug trip sequence, which by the way is just fucking atrocious. But, you know, that I could at least see because the music of, you know, this band was commonly associated with psychedelia and drug culture, but not really protest culture as much. You know, like you have, which I guess the Summer of Love was, you know, a kind of protest culture, but like this film really gets in the weeds with the political drama stuff. Like the lead love interest, Lucy, right? She is like a political activist, and she becomes like this revolutionary, like communist, and then her arc, spoiler alert, I suppose, is that she learns to not care about that stuff and instead be in love, which was strange. But anyway, they really get in the weeds with this stuff. There's like the civil rights era and the anti-Vietnam War protests, and really there are other bands from this time aside from, like, you know, the Kinks that I think definitely were more imbued with the protest, with those protests, than the Monkees were. And so I just thought that was really weird. You know, like, I think they thought going in, well, we associate this music with this era, so it'll make sense. But then when you actually watch the movie, it doesn't. And I mean, aside from that, all of the story elements, character elements, and visuals of this movie are just terrible. Like, the movie tries to do some abstract, weird stuff, and it falls on its face every single time. Part of the reason being that, first of all, it rarely ever even fits. I remember one bit where all of a sudden, this was somewhere towards the end, it wasn't during the psychedelic sequence, like all of a sudden we get this shot of like these people painted in white and they're nude and they're standing in the ocean and then they fall over. And it's like this abstract image that comes out of nowhere, has nothing to do with anything, and the film rarely has stuff like that in it up to that point anyway, so it's just like, why was that even there? it's kind of like this movie's kind of baffling to me, honestly. I don't really understand anything that went into it.
Yeah, really the only scenes that I like, the only musical scenes that I like are those that are strictly just performances on screen. Because so often, to your point, so often a lot of the performances here start to feel like music videos because they become these oddities of like people in weird masks or weird CGI or just nonsense on the screen that doesn't really work. But like for me, the real and kind of the only standout scene is the bowling alley where where it's like the first time he's seeing her and they're like doing fun choreographed things in a bowling alley. Because other than that, it's like all just feels so disconnected from anything. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I kind of mentioned it before as well, but like the whole part of all these little like winks at the camera to the audience that are like, yeah, that's right, we referenced the Beatles. Of course, I'm talking about the anatomical creature, the beetle. I don't know if you picked up on any of the references to the animal beetle.
Yeah, for sure, all throughout the film. Yeah.
Um, but like for instance, I was just thinking back. Remember, I said that they named one character Prudence, and it's like, well, of course, you know where that's going to go. But the other thing I'm just remembering is also she came into their apartment through a window in the bathroom, and then Jude almost basically looks at the camera and says she came in through the bathroom window, and I was just like, why?
Oh, there's so
I
much of that. Like,
and it's like so much of that stuff.
yeah, I mean, and then you mentioned with the characters' names, but like, that's another thing where the way they introduce all of their name, it also just feels like a wink. I mean, a lot of things do, but this is what really baffles me about the film. Like, all of that stuff's already bad, but I really, really, when you get down to the story, this film is like a political drama. Like it's really, really getting into the weeds with these political situations of the time. So much so that the story often revolves around that stuff. And I really question what the film's motivations were with all of it. Because the way that the things that characters learn and decide as the film goes along, and the things that the film sort of seems to support and not support just very much confused me. Like I mentioned something, I'll try to get your take on it and see if you felt the same way. It really felt like with Lucy, the point of her character was kind of an anti-revolutionary point, and that it almost undermined all of the protests that the film showed, because in the end, with her character, she ended up deciding not to partake in it anymore. And I'm really, really confused as to what the movie thought it was saying by that. Instead, so to get a little
Yeah,
bit.
although I'll just say in that particular instance, I agree. However, there was a very clear reason why she decided to stop. Like basically her revolutionary pact were becoming violent.
Yeah.
So
No.
like she was okay when it was a non-violent revolution, but once they started thinking about building bombs and stuff, she kind of walked away from it.
So
However, with that being said, I just wanted to say before you say anything. With that being said, I 100% agree. Like the motivations of these characters and even the message that the story is trying to portray are so paper thin that it doesn't really make sense why any of it is even being said. And you add on top of that um, the songs by the Clash, and it doesn't really fit. Like I don't really get what the like ultimately none of what you're seeing on screen that have real significant importance other than the love story of the two main characters is ever really fleshed out or even resolved or discussed in any meaningful way. It just kind of happens, which I guess in one hand that's like, you're writing a piece of media in this time frame, maybe it makes sense that these characters are going through the motions in this situation. But as you mentioned, it's like so pinnacle to the story that that there is no resolution means that this film doesn't say anything at all.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. Because, like, I think maybe what they thought they were doing was like a message of peace and nonviolence. Like, the thing that weirds me out about it isn't that her motivation in leaving in the very end. It's that earlier in the film, when she first gets involved with this like communist organization, right? Basically, like her and Jude get in this big fight because Jude gets mad that she's with them. But it's not because Jude has a principled um, anti-revolutionary or non-violent perspective when it comes to protest. It's just because her caring about social issues is getting in the way of their relationship. And
Also, she got a TV.
she got a TV also. And what's weird to me is that from the perspective of what the film is trying to say, if it's trying to say anything, it seems like Jude's perspective is ultimately justified by the movie. That was what weirded me out because I thought watching that scene that they were going to prove Jude wrong, which they kind of do, but then they don't because in the end Lucy does decide to drop it to go to him. And I understand it was because of the violence, but once she drops it, she drops it. You know, you don't see her again as like, oh, now I'm going to nonviolent protest. So it's like, no, she's just done. So it's like, that was really weird to me. And I also was a little bit irritated by the film's usage of the song Revolution in that scene because the song Revolution isn't a protest song against the concept of protest, period. It's simply, you know, against the most radical elements. And, like, I think they went a little too far using the song here because in the way that Jude was singing it, he just didn't like that she cared about that shit, period. So that was like another thing where it was again like it felt like the film was just trying to get the song in there, but like the way they misunderstood the song was annoying, and the fact that Jude's perspective was never actually proven wrong really made me question again like what the point of showing all of this was, and if the film or director or screenwriter or whoever was responsible for it really like had an opinion that they wanted to share, or if they just didn't think it through. And either way, it's a little bit um, it's a little bit insulting.
One last thing I have to talk about, I mentioned it before, but also, why are Joe Cocker and Bono in this movie?
Well, because they were members of the band that the film is using songs from.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I forgot.
Can I just like bring up the one thing I really feel the need to mention? Just if no one's seen this film and you don't want to watch it all the way through, which I wouldn't personally recommend, not to skip ahead, but there is one scene in this film that is so terrible. I feel like everybody should see it, and it is the cover of "For the Benefit of Mr. Kite" in this film. So they go to this psychedelic circus in the middle of the movie to represent, you know, the Sergeant Pepper Magical Mystery Tour era of the Kinks, and they meet this like circus guy who sings "Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite." It is not only the worst cover of that song you could possibly imagine, where they even keep like adding lines, like these weird like wink wink nudge nudge lines. It's really strange, but then it digresses into this attempt at doing something like weird and psychedelic where they have like a green screen map on the ground and they green screen a bunch of characters like sloppily flying around over the map. It is hideous, and it made me laugh a lot, and I feel like you should look it up on YouTube and watch it.
Yeah, the last thing before we wrap it up, you asked what did I like about the film? Not very much. I think some of the covers are okay. I like that bowling alley music video. And that's about it, really.
Well, you can wrap it up then if you want to.
Yeah, I will. A lot of characters in this movie get a backstory, and you don't care about them, or they don't matter in any way, shape, or form. They mainly are just given a backstory to have a song that they can sing, and then they're kind of throwaway characters. And that's what this whole movie feels like. It feels like a throwaway film to put a whole bunch of the Police songs in a film, just so that way you can have that experience. And the visuals aren't very great. Some of the composition is okay. Like, I think on paper it works very well. And like I mentioned, there's a few songs here and there that I actually kind of like the covers for. But ultimately, I give this movie, I think, a 4. Would I recommend it? No. Have I watched it like 3 times? Yes. I don't know why. One of those times was contractual obligation, as in the contractual obligation to watch it for this very moment. But I would not recommend watching it one time, really. It is getting a sequel, though.
Wait, is it really?
Yeah, they announced in 2020 that the sequel is kind of in the works.
Oh, wow. Huh. Well, uh-oh. That's all I have to say to that.
Which is good because, as we all know, the Rolling Stones are coming out with more music every day. So
Yeah, and Phoebe Bridgers is still working with them, given that this is now the time period in which she is alive.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, yeah, I would give this film a 2. Um, I honestly just, I don't, I think every level that this film has to it doesn't work. I don't think there's anything good about it, really. I really struggle to think of a single thing I even liked in the movie. The only thing, I thought the Let It Be cover was okay. There's like this gospel Let It Be cover, and it reminds me kind of Aretha Franklin's version of the song, which I
oh
assume
yeah,
was,
that was good too. I did like that also.
yeah, I assume that was probably the basis for that cover, and you know, Aretha Franklin's version of the song is pretty good, so that was also pretty good. But aside from that, I really didn't like any of the covers. In fact, some of them were really, really bad. At best, they were like fine, but I think, you know, that is the main thing people are probably coming to this film to watch, and I really don't think it was good. I don't think that they worked these songs into the story well. I don't think that the covers were good, and I don't think they're any more. They don't do anything interesting with the source material, really. And the few clever ideas they have are very confusingly shown or poorly shown. I mean, honestly, like, if you wanted to see a film where they use Dear Prudence as a come out the closet metaphor, if you could even call it a metaphor, seeing as the character literally comes out of a closet. Um, if you wanted to see that, then this is the movie for you. But again, like, I think this film was very misguided in its portrayal of the political side of the film, which, believe me, I am not overplaying. It really is the crux of a lot of the story. So I feel like the fact that it left me confused as to what the point of it was is pretty bad. And yeah, it's just a very, very strange, poorly made, confusing, baffling film. And the only reason I'm not giving it a 1 is because that would be mean. I definitely don't recommend the movie. And I think, you know, the people who are most likely to watch it are going to be fans of the Insects Beatles, just because there are references to that in the film. And I personally wouldn't recommend it to those people either, because I don't necessarily think it does that particular creature much justice. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. I guess we can move on to the recommendations, with starting with you, Steven.
Yeah, certainly if you're an entomologist, this might be your favorite film. And with that, I will move on to my recommendation. I wanted to say before we get into the recommendations, of course, it is that time again. It is the Toyota-thon, the Lexus season of giving. Happy Honda Days, everyone. We're in the spirit of cheer, the spirit of sales. So for that, I will give a recommendation. This is a film. It is A Christmas Story. It's a 1983 comedy. It's become definitely a cult classic at this point. Next time we will talk about A Christmas Story.
Sweet. And Steven, for my Happy Honda Days Lexus Season of Giving Toyota-thon recommendation, I am recommending the album Blue by Joni Mitchell. Blue is a 1970 album by Joni Mitchell. It is very wintry, and there is a song on it that is sometimes considered a Christmas song. Though I don't know if it's ever been considered a Honda Days song or a Toyota-thon song.
I'm sure if you went into a dealership, they would play it.
They might, yeah. Yeah, that's my recommendation. So that's actually all that we have today for our epic Phoebe Bridgers time travel episode. We really hope that you enjoyed, and as always, we are on Castbox. If you're listening here live on YouTube or later on YouTube, you can find us on Castbox. We are Get Recc'd on Castbox, of course, and I try to get these episodes up there within a decent time frame after they come out on YouTube. If you listen on Castbox, you can download Castbox app and listen to us on the go. And if you are listening to us on Castbox, we actually stream these episodes live on YouTube at the YouTube channel Casting404, so you can come and hang out in the chat. And if you're really lucky, we might notice you, but not comment on you. Never. It is contractually obligated, which we have broken many times before, but we promise to be better. And that's all I have to say.
The lawyers got on us, finally.
So do you have anything to add to that, Stu?
Well, no, the first thing, I guess, just two quick things, actually. The first one, I just wanted to say Phoebe Bridgers, of course, not only traveled through time, but she also traveled through space, and that's why it's called Across the Universe. And the second thing I wanted to add was just to thank everyone, again, for listening to our podcast. We are happy to have you here live, if you are here live. We're happy to have you listening on Castbox, if you're listening there. Again, as I mentioned, next episode will be our special wintertime episode. And most likely we will do our traditional New Year's time episode after that. So 2 themed episodes in the next coming weeks. So look out for those. We will see you then.
Yes, and preemptively, happy Honda Days, everyone. From the both of us.
Especially to the entomologists out there.
Yeah, and I think with
entomologists listening, happy Honda Days to you.
And with that, those were our thoughts. Those were our recommendations. Get Recc'd.